If your child told you something you did years ago, something you thought no one else saw, would you still call it imagination? That was the question that started haunting me the day my son, Chika, opened his mouth and reminded me of something I had buried deep in my heart. He was only 3 years old. That evening, we were in the living room. The TV hummed softly in the background, and he was rolling his little red toy car back and forth across the rug. I wasn't paying much attention until he looked up at me with his big brown eyes and said, "Mommy, on my first birthday you wore a yellow dress with flowers. You dropped cake on the floor by mistake. And you cried in the kitchen before people came." The words hit me like thunder. I froze. How could he know that? Yes, I wore that yellow dress. Yes, I dropped the cake. But the part about me crying. Nobody saw me. I had gone into the kitchen alone, hidden behind the fridge, and cried because my husband didn't show up that day. He had been at the office, like always. I had wiped my tears before stepping back out to smile for the guests. There were no pictures. No videos. Nobody knew. But my son remembered. At first, I laughed awkwardly, brushing it off. Maybe he overheard me say something once. But inside, a small uneasiness took root. And then it started happening more often. At bedtime, when I hummed lullabies, he would suddenly whisper, "Grandma used to sing this too." She rubbed my chest and said I had strong lungs. I almost dropped him from shock. My mother had died when Chika was barely 9 months old. She had indeed said those exact words to me one afternoon while holding him. I never told anyone about it. Another day, I was frying plantain when he walked into the kitchen, sniffed, and said, "Mommy, when I was small like baby, you used to burn plantain a lot. Daddy teased you that you don't know how to fry." I gripped the spoon tightly. That conversation had happened when he was barely able to sit on his own. By now, I knew it wasn't normal. My son remembered everything. Every detail of his short life. Every moment. Every word spoken around him. His memory was perfect, like a machine that recorded and replayed without mistakes. At first, it was almost a blessing. His teachers loved him. He never forgot his assignments, lessons, or even the smallest detail from a storybook. Parents would pull me aside during school runs to say, "You're so lucky. Your child is gifted." But gifts can become curses. One Saturday night, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered something that made my whole body stiffen. "Mommy, I also remember when I was not your child." I blinked. "What do you mean, Chika?" He looked so calm, too calm for a child, and said, "Before I came here, I had another name. Another mommy. Another life." A cold shiver swept down my spine. I forced a laugh. "Stop saying that, my dear. You're my only child. You've always been mine." But he just stared at me, his little hands gripping the bedsheet, and replied softly, "I remember how I died." I gasped. My chest tightened. "Chika, don't ever say that again." My voice cracked, more from fear than anger. I kissed his forehead and walked out, but I could not sleep that night. His words kept echoing. And then things got worse. Weeks later, he started speaking names of people we didn't know, places we had never visited. One night, I heard him praying in his room. Not in English, not in Igbo, not in any language I recognized. His small voice trembled as if he was reciting something too heavy for him. Then came the screaming. I woke up to his cry at 2 a.m. He was clutching his head, rolling on the bed, shouting, "Make it stop. I don't want to remember anymore. Make it stop." I grabbed him, tears streaming down my face, but he pushed me away, his eyes wide with fear. And in that trembling voice, my little boy said something that shattered me completely. "Mommy, the things I remember, they are not all mine. Some belong to dead people. When your child tells you he remembers the lives of the dead, you don't sleep the same again. For weeks, I walked around my own home like a stranger, watching Chika from the corner of my eye. Every smile, every word, every little movement, suddenly felt like I was living with someone I didn't fully know. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, he walked into the kitchen quietly. His voice was calm, but the words froze my blood. "Mommy, do you know someone called Ngozi?" I dropped the knife in my hand with a clatter. "No," I whispered, my throat dry. "Why?" He tilted his head like he was listening to something only he could hear, then said softly, "She is crying. She says she died before she finished school." My knees almost gave way. I forced myself to laugh, to tell him it was just his imagination. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't normal play. The memories began to pile up. Chika would suddenly pause during meals, his spoon in midair, his eyes glassy, then he would mutter things like, "I used to sell bread at the bus stop. I remember being pushed into the road." Or, "I was a woman once. They didn't let me see my baby before I died." Each time, my heart cracked a little more. I wanted to take him to church, to a doctor, to anyone who could explain what was happening. But fear kept me silent. Because a small, dangerous thought crept into my mind. What if people started saying my child was cursed? One night, I finally broke. I sat beside his bed and whispered, "God, please, if this is a gift, teach me how to handle it. If it's a curse, take it away. Please don't let my son suffer." But as if God wanted to test me, that same night I woke up to hear him talking in his sleep. Not mumbling. Talking. His voice was strange, deeper, older. He spoke in sentences, in Igbo, Yoruba, and then in a language I didn't even know. I shook him awake, terrified. His eyes opened slowly, confused. "Mommy, why are you crying?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. The breaking point came a week later. We were walking home from school when he suddenly stopped in the middle of the road, staring at a small kiosk. His tiny hand squeezed mine hard. "Mommy, I know this place. I remember dying here." My whole body went cold. I wanted to drag him away, but he pulled free and walked closer to the kiosk. His voice trembled. "It was night. I was a man, they stabbed me. Right here." The kiosk owner looked up, confused, watching as my little boy's face twisted with pain he shouldn't know. I rushed forward, grabbed him, and held him tight. My hands shook as I whispered, "Chika, stop. Please stop." He buried his face in my chest and began to sob. "Mommy, I don't want to remember anymore. It hurts." That night, as I held him until he fell asleep, a thought kept pounding in my mind. If my son remembers the dead, why him? And if these memories belong to people who died unjustly, what happens when they all start demanding for their stories to be told? Because lately, Chika had begun to wake up with names of strangers. And each one felt like the beginning of something I wasn't ready to face. When your child carries memories that do not belong to him, every day feels like walking on glass. By the time Chika turned 4, I had learned to live half in fear, half in denial. He would laugh like every other child, play with toys, sing along to cartoons, but then, without warning, his eyes would cloud over, and he would speak words that did not belong to him. Words too heavy for a boy his age. One day it was a girl named Ngozi. Another day, it was a man who sold bread by the roadside. Sometimes, it was a woman who wept because she never saw her baby again. And each time, I would hold him, trembling, whispering, "It's okay, my son. It's okay." But deep down, I knew it was not. I could no longer hide. My relatives noticed his strange words during a family gathering. My sister pulled me aside, her voice sharp with worry. "You need to take this boy somewhere. To a doctor, or to a church. Something is not right. So I did. The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and polish. I sat in front of the doctor's desk with Chika curled against my side, his tiny fingers playing with the edge of my scarf. My voice shook as I explained everything. The doctor listened patiently. He did not interrupt. His eyes flicked now and then to Chika, who was humming softly, unaware of the weight of my words. When I finished, silence filled the room. Finally, the doctor leaned back, folded his hands across his desk, and said calmly, "Madam, your son is fine. His health is sound. His brain is not abnormal. What you are describing is unusual, but not unheard of." I frowned, leaning forward. "Then what is it?" He gave me a small, knowing smile. "In our culture, it is often called reincarnation. Some children remember details from their past lives. Sometimes, they recall more than one. But it fades with time. As they grow, the memories blur. Eventually, they forget, and they live as themselves." I shook my head in disbelief. "So, you mean my son has lived before?" The doctor nodded. "Yes. And with time, madam, he will grow out of it. There is no need for panic." For the first time in months, I felt something like hope, but also a fresh, burning curiosity. That afternoon, back at home, I sat on the balcony with Chika. The neighborhood children's laughter drifted from the street as they played football. Chika leaned against me, his head warm on my arm. Then, in the softest voice, he whispered, "Mommy, I know who I was before you had me." My chest tightened. I tried to smile. "Who, my love?" He lifted his face to mine. His eyes, so young yet so ancient, looked straight into me. "I was Papa, your father. I was your father before." The words seemed to tilt. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. "Don't say that, Chika. That's not funny." But then he began to say things only my late father would have known. He described the small farm behind our old house, the one no one in my new neighborhood had ever seen. He mentioned the wooden stool my father carved when I was a teenager, the stool that broke years ago and was thrown away. And then, with his little hand gripping mine tightly, he said the very words my father had whispered to me one night when I was afraid of the dark. "Don't cry. The moon also watches over you." My breath caught. Tears filled my eyes. How could my child, my little boy who had never heard those words, know them so perfectly? I pressed him against me, sobbing quietly as he smiled innocently, unaware of the storm he had stirred in my heart. But Chika wasn't finished. "Mommy," he said softly, "after I was Papa, I came back again. Not close to you this time. Far, but still family. I was your cousin's son. I died in a car accident. Do you remember when they said it was too soon?" My blood ran cold. Yes, I remembered. A distant cousin's child had died years ago in a crash, barely a teenager. The grief had shaken the family, but I had never thought about it again. And now my son was telling me he was that boy. 3 lives. 1 soul. Sitting beside me now as Chika. Still, my heart was restless. I wanted peace. Answers. Closure. So one quiet Sunday afternoon, after the service crowd had gone, I took Chika to our pastor. The church hall was silent, the air heavy with incense and faint echoes of morning worship. The pastor, a gentle elderly man with a calm smile, listened as I told him everything. He then placed his hand gently on Chika's head and began to pray. His voice was low, steady, carrying warmth that seemed to push away the shadows. When he was done, he looked at me and said, "Your son is not cursed. He is not possessed. He is simply reincarnated. A soul that has walked this earth before. With time, the memories will fade, and he will live his own life. Do not be afraid. Raise him in love. That is all he needs. I broke down in tears, relief pouring through me like rain on dry soil. That night, for the first time in months, Chika slept soundly. No screams. No strange names. Just the peaceful breathing of a child. I sat by his bedside, watching him, my heart swelling with gratitude. I whispered softly, "Papa, cousin, whoever you were before, thank you for coming back to me as my son. This time, I will protect you. This time, I will love you fully." And for the first time, I truly believed what the doctor and pastor had said. Chika would be fine. He would grow out of the memories. And in this life, he would not live as someone else's shadow. He would live as himself.